The night was ink black, thick enough to swallow the world. In the sprawling gardens of the Greenwich estate, the drone of late summer crickets did little to mask the sound of quiet sobbing from the second-floor master suite. Leo Vance leaned against his headboard, a dull ache throbbing in his bandaged right hand. His gaze drifted past the window to the starless sky, but his attention was tethered to the weeping. That was the boss's wife's room, Sophia Caldwell. Her husband, Arthur Sterling, had been dead for a week. The funeral had just ended. She was his second wife, young and beautiful and now impossibly rich. Leo should have been long gone. He had failed to save his boss, and with Arthur's death, his contract was finished. But in the accident that had killed Arthur, Leo had been badly injured. He'd wanted to leave, but Sophia had insisted he stay at the estate to recover, saying she couldn't abandon the man who tried to save her husband. Leo knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing with Sophia ever was. The crying eventually stopped, replaced by the sharp, rhythmic click of high heels on hardwood. He knew the sound. Sophia was going out again. She'd been doing it for the past few nights, slipping out after midnight and not returning until the first hint of dawn. He could always smell the cloying scent of expensive liquor on her when she returned, a ghost of it lingering in the hallway. Leo closed his eyes, trying to force himself to sleep. But his senses, honed by years of professional vigilance, caught every detail. The soft thud of a car door opening and closing, the low growl of an engine, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway, fading into the night. Sophia's face had been a constant, intrusive image in his mind lately. Since Arthur's death, she seemed to have grown even more striking, her beauty sharpened by a dangerous edge. Her eyes were different now. They held secrets and a simmering, predatory anticipation. He didn't know how much time had passed before he finally drifted into a shallow sleep, only to be jolted awake by the sound of hurried footsteps downstairs. He sat up in a single, fluid motion, his left hand instinctively reaching for his hip, only to find the empty space where his sidearm used to be. They'd taken it from him after the accident. The footsteps drew closer, accompanied by a low murmur of conversation. Leo's ears twitched. It was Sophia's voice, and a man's, deep and unervingly calm. "The new will is ready," the man, a lawyer by the sound of him, said in a hushed tone laced with satisfaction. "Once you sign, the shares and the majority of the assets will be transferred to your name." Sophia didn't answer right away. Leo could picture her, swirling the wine in her glass, the dark red liquid mirroring the cool calculation on her face. After a moment, she spoke, her voice smooth as silk. "He won't find out, will he?" "Of course not," the lawyer chuckled. "He's dead. The dead don't talk. Everything is proceeding as planned. I just need my payment." The conversation ended. As the footsteps receded, Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. Before he could process what he'd heard, his bedroom door creaked open. Sophia stood silhouetted in the doorway, leaning against the frame in a red silk nightgown. The light from the hall cast her in a dramatic glow, outlining a figure that could stop traffic. She held a glass of red wine, her eyes hazy but sharp, a knowing, half-mocking smile playing on her lips. It was a look that saw right through him. "You heard that, didn't you?" Her voice was a whisper, but it carried an undeniable weight. Leo started, but the words died in his throat. She glided into the room, the click of her heels a counterpoint to his frantic pulse. The smell of wine and expensive perfume filled the air, but her gaze was stone-cold sober. She stopped at his bedside, looking down at him with a faint, triumphant curve of her lips. She reached out, a single, manicured finger tracing the line of his jaw. "You know too much," she murmured, her voice a velvet threat. "But I don't want to hurt you. On the contrary, I need you. What do you want me to do?" Leo's throat felt tight, his heart a drum against his ribs. Sophia leaned down, her face flushed with wine, drawing closer until her lips were almost touching his ear. The warmth of her breath ghosted across his skin. "Be my secret," she whispered, the word a potent seduction. "My lover." He could feel the heat radiating from her, could smell the wine on her breath. He swallowed hard, his own breathing growing ragged. He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to ground himself, fighting the primal urge to either push her away or pull her closer, to overpower her before she overpowered him. After a long, charged silence, he finally spoke. Okay. The word came out as a low growl, edged with a finality that surprised even him. Sophia's smile widened, becoming utterly captivating. She straightened up, drained her wine glass in one smooth motion, and placed the empty glass on his nightstand. Then she turned and walked out, closing the door softly behind her. The moment the latch clicked, a violent shiver ran through Leo's body. He collapsed back onto the pillows, closing his eyes. The memory of his boss's final, desperate command warred with the intoxicating image of Sophia. He had no idea what her real game was, but he was trapped in the middle of it, his thoughts a tangled, chaotic mess. Hashtag chapter 2. The lesson sunlight sliced through the blinds, waking Leo. It was already past noon. The pain in his arm had subsided to a dull ache, but the conversation from last night was a thorn lodged deep in his conscience. Just then, the door opened and Sophia entered. She wore a silk robe, her long hair cascading over her shoulders, her face still soft with sleep. In her hand was a steaming mug, which she offered to him. "Feeling any better?" she asked, her voice tinged with genuine concern. Leo nodded, taking the mug. His fingers brushed against the back of her hand, and the soft, warm touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. He looked down quickly, avoiding her eyes, and took a long drink of the tea. The bitter taste flooded his mouth. "Starting today, you're going to work for me," Sophia said, sitting on the edge of the bed. She crossed her long legs, the slit of her robe revealing a sliver of pale thigh. "Doing what?" Leo's brow furrowed. He felt a familiar surge of caution, his fingers tightening around the mug. Sophia laughed softly. "Relax. I'm not asking you to commit a crime. Since my husband died, a lot of people have their eyes on me. I need to learn how to protect myself." She paused, her gaze falling to his bandaged arm. "I know you're good. I saw what you did. I want you to teach me some self-defense." "All right," Leo said, a wave of relief washing over him. It was a task, something tangible he could focus on. Sophia's smile was radiant. She stood and walked to the window, pulling the curtains wide open. Blinding sunlight flooded the room, and Leo instinctively shielded his eyes. "Let's start now," she said, turning back to him. "I've already had the home gym prepared. Meet me downstairs when you're ready." When Leo, grabbing a protein bar for breakfast, made his way to the gym, Sophia was already there. She changed into a set of form-fitting Lululemon leggings and a matching sports bra that left little to the imagination. Leo couldn't help but let his eyes linger for a moment. "Start with the basics," she said, a playful smile on her lips. "Okay, let's warm up first." After they stretched, Leo moved in front of her and began demonstrating some foundational self-defense techniques. His movements were clean and efficient, his explanations clear and concise. Sophia listened intently, but her gaze never wavered from him. It was an unnerving mix of admiration and appraisal, as if she were testing him in more ways than one. "Leo, am I doing this right?" she asked, striking a clumsy pose. "Your form is a little off. Here." He stepped behind her, placing his right hand lightly on her waist and his left on her wrist, guiding her through the correct motion. He felt a slight tremble run through her body. He was acutely aware of her back pressed against his chest, of the warmth radiating from her skin. A ripple of something unfamiliar stirred within her. "You're a very good teacher," she said suddenly, her tone teasing. Leo's jaw tightened. He knew she was pushing his boundaries, but he couldn't back down now. "Let's continue," he said, his voice low. For the next few hours, Leo patiently instructed her. She was a quick learner, but every movement was infused with a deliberate, calculated seduction. Her glances, her breathing, the way she'd accidentally brush against him. It was all a relentless assault on his composure. Finally, she stopped, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. "That's enough for today," she said with a smile. "I'm going to take a shower. Could you go to my closet and find something for me to wear?" "A dress. The red one." Leo nodded, watching her walk out of the gym. He went to her massive walk-in closet, a room filled with a dazzling array of designer clothes. His fingers brushed against the soft fabrics as he searched, finally landing on a scarlet silk slip dress. He knew it was her favorite color. He carried the dress to the master bathroom and knocked gently. "Come in." Her voice drifted out, lazy and relaxed. Leo pushed the door open. The room was thick with steam. Sophia was standing in front of the mirror, wrapped in a single white bath towel, her wet hair clinging to her shoulders. Her skin glowed in the soft light. "Just leave it on the hook," she said, her back still to him. Leo hung the dress up and turned to leave. "Wait, can you help me with my hair?" Her voice was soft, almost a plea. He froze, then turned back. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the hairdryer, his fingers sinking into the damp silk of her hair. The floral scent of her shampoo filled his senses, a constant, dizzying provocation. His movements were gentle, but every time his knuckles accidentally brushed against the warm skin of her neck, he felt her shiver. "Okay, the dress," she said, her voice husky with suggestion. Sophia slowly unwrapped the towel. It fell to the floor in a soft heap, revealing the smooth, flawless skin of her back. She stood there, completely exposed to his gaze. She crossed her arms over her chest and turned to face him. Leo quickly averted his eyes, his face burning. He handed her the dress, catching a glimpse of her sly smile in the mirror's reflection. "Is there anything else?" Leo's voice was hoarse. Sophia turned back to him fully, a slow, knowing smile on her lips. She simply looked at him, letting the silence stretch. "No," she said finally, her tone rich with unspoken meaning. "You can go now." Leo practically fled the room. Back in his own suite, he stood under a cold shower for a long time, but he couldn't wash away the images burned into his mind. Chapter 3. The meeting a few days later, Sophia stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main living room, swirling a glass of red wine. Her gaze was distant, lost in thought, her silhouette captivating under the soft evening lights. Leo sat on the couch, one leg crossed over the other. His hand was nearly healed, but Sophia had made no indication she was ready for him to leave. Her behavior was a confusing mix of warm and cold, a constant test of his limits. "You're coming with me tonight," Sophia said suddenly, her voice cool and direct. Leo looked up, meeting her eyes in the reflection of the glass. "Where are we going?" he asked calmly. "To see someone." She offered no further explanation, turning and heading for her walk-in closet, leaving him alone on the sofa. She emerged a short time later, transformed. She wore a sleek black dress with a thigh-high slit that showed off her long legs. Her makeup was flawless, her red lips a stark, beautiful slash of color. She was a rose in full bloom, beautiful and covered in thorns. "Let's go," she said, pausing in front of him and tapping his shoulder lightly. Leo rose and followed her out of the mansion. A black sedan was waiting. Once they were inside, the car pulled away from the estate and headed toward the glittering lights of Manhattan. In the car, Sophia leaned back against the leather seat, staring out the window, lost in thought. Leo sat beside her, the scent of her perfume a heady, distracting presence. "Do you know who we're going to see?" she asked, breaking the silence. "No," Leo answered honestly. Sophia let out a soft laugh, turning to look at him, her eyes playful. "An old friend," she said. "And an enemy." Leo didn't press for details. He knew her well enough by now. The car finally pulled up in front of an exclusive, members-only club in Midtown. Sophia got out, and Leo was right behind her. Inside, the lighting was dim, and the music was a low, throbbing beat. Sophia walked purposefully toward a private room at the back, pushing the door open without knocking. A middle-aged man in an expensive suit sat inside, his face a mask of cold indifference. "Sophia, it's been a while," the man said, rising with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Davies, you're looking well," Sophia replied, her own smile just as artificial. Leo stood behind her, his eyes scanning the room, assessing the situation. He felt the man's gaze linger on him for a moment, sharp and probing. "And this is?" Davies asked, gesturing toward Leo with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "My security," Sophia said flatly, an edge of authority in her voice. Davies smirked, but didn't push it. They sat down and began to discuss business. Leo stood by the wall, his attention fixed on Sophia. He could feel the tension in the room coiling tighter, his fingers unconsciously clenching and unclenching at his sides. Suddenly, Davies' tone sharpened. "Sophia, do you really think you're in control here? Your husband is dead. You're just a grieving widow." What makes you think you can challenge me? Sophia's face went pale, but she recovered instantly, a cold smile touching her lips. And you think you've won, Davies? Don't forget, I still have certain documents. I'm sure a lot of people would be very interested in them. Davies's expression darkened. He shot up from his chair, lunged across the table, and grabbed Sophia by the throat. You better not try anything foolish, or else. He never finished the sentence. He cried out in pain as Leo seized his wrist, twisting it with brutal efficiency before yanking him away from Sophia and shoving him to the floor. Let me go. You piece of trash, you dare to touch me. Davies roared, struggling against Leo's grip. Leo stared down at him, his eyes like ice, and slowly increased the pressure. Davies yelped in pain. Sophia stood, calmly smoothing her dress. Mr. Davies, I think our conversation is over for tonight, she said, her voice chillingly calm. I hope you'll reconsider my proposal. With that, she turned and swept out of the room. Leo released Davies and followed her. Once they were outside, Sophia's confident stride suddenly faltered. Leo quickly caught her arm to steady her. Are you okay? She shook her head, a fine sheen of sweat on her forehead. Her body was trembling, the adrenaline from the confrontation finally hitting her. Take me home, she whispered, her voice weak. On the ride back, Sophia leaned against the seat with her eyes closed. Leo sat beside her, watching her face in the intermittent glow of the streetlights. He could sense her slowly regaining her composure. Back at the estate, he helped her into her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, her gaze still distant. Thank you, she said suddenly, her voice low and laced with a surprising warmth. Leo was taken aback for a second. I was just doing my job, he replied. Leo, she said, her voice dropping to a serious tone. Did Arthur? Did he say anything to you before he died? A cold knot formed in Leo's stomach. He forced a casual smile. Sophia, it was over in an instant. A direct impact. There was no time for last words. She looked up, her eyes locking with his, searching, as if trying to peel back the layers of his composure. A complex emotion flickered in her gaze. Doubt, perhaps, or hesitation. After a long moment, she sighed softly and reached up to cup his face, her touch surprisingly gentle. You know, she said with a faint smile, you make me feel safe. Leo didn't answer. He could feel her thumb stroking his cheek. Stay with me tonight, she whispered, her voice full of a raw, desperate finality. Leo didn't refuse. He knew he couldn't run from this anymore. Her body moved closer, her red lips parting slightly. When their mouths met, his mind went blank. The world outside the two of them simply ceased to exist. He could feel her breath, her warmth, the frantic beat of her heart against his. Her kiss was gentle at first, then passionate, as if she were pouring all her unspoken fears and desires into it. Leo stopped fighting. He responded, meeting her intensity with his own. The night deepened, but the temperature in the room continued to rise. Sophia pressed herself against him, seeking an anchor in the storm. Leo's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, feeling the soft, warm curves of her body. Their shadows merged, two figures locked in a silent, desperate battle. Her breathing grew ragged, her fingers digging into his shoulders for support. From now on, she whispered against his ear, her voice thick with possession, you're mine. Leo didn't answer with words. His actions spoke for him, fierce and consuming, until she finally drifted into an exhausted sleep. Only then did he slip away and return to his own room. Hashtag chapter 4, the target. Leo stood at his window on the second floor, looking out at the perfectly manicured rose garden below, but his mind was a tempest. Since that night, he had become the lady of the manor's secret, her lover. Her eyes always held a cryptic depth he couldn't decipher, and her ambition, her cold-blooded scheming, was beginning to suffocate him. Leo, come here a minute. Sophia's voice cut through his thoughts. He turned. She was leaning against his doorframe, dressed in a deep red silk robe, the very picture of languid power. Ma'am. Leo walked toward her, his tone respectful but distant. Sophia smiled faintly. Don't be so formal. We're past that, aren't we? Leo didn't reply, just lowered his gaze, avoiding her searching eyes. She didn't seem to mind. I have a new project for you, she continued. A plan I need you to execute. What plan? He asked, looking up, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes. Sophia walked to the window, gazing out at the garden. I need you to get close to Claire Sterling. Claire. Leo froze. You mean Arthur's daughter? You want me to? What? She cut him off, spinning around to face him, her eyes hard. You work for me now. Don't forget that. She continued, her voice chillingly calm. She's always resented me, convinced I stole her father's affection. Now that he's gone, she hates me, which is perfect. It's an opportunity. Leo felt a knot of conflict tighten in his gut. Claire was Arthur's only child, headstrong and fiercely loyal to her father's memory, openly hostile to her stepmother. What do you want me to do? He asked, his voice low. Sophia's lips curved into a slow, predatory smile. She traced a circle on his chest with her finger. I want you to get close to her, become her bodyguard, her assistant, earn her trust, and then I want you to make her fall in love with you. Leo was silent for a long moment. Fall in love with me? Sophia's smile was intoxicating. She stroked his cheek. Yes, I need you to help me get her shares in Sterling Holdings. She didn't wait for his answer. That old fool Arthur transferred 10% of the company to his precious daughter years ago. A little girl like her, what right does she have to challenge me? I sacrificed everything for that company. I'm going to have total control. But how could she fall for me? And why would she ever sign her shares over to you? Leo challenged. You were her father's most trusted man. I'm sure you know her better than you think. You'll figure out, Sophia said, patting his shoulder, her touch both a caress and a warning. Leo finally understood the real reason she kept him here. Don't worry, she whispered, her body pressing against his, her warm breath ghosting across his ear. Succeed, and you can have anything you want, including me. Her lips curved into a smile. Her fingers slid down his arm, lacing through his as she led him back toward her room. Leo followed, his mind numb, his spirit in turmoil. Hashtag Chapter 5. Meeting Claire. A few days later, Leo stood in the elevator of the Sterling Holdings Tower, his face a stoic mask. Dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, he tapped a restless rhythm on the polished steel handrail. His reflection stared back at him, a man looking more tired than he felt. Arthur's death, Sophia's manipulations, the secrets that clung to him like a second skin. It was all a heavy weight. And now he had to face Claire Sterling. The one person his former boss had cherished above all else, the one person he'd indirectly sworn to protect. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Leo took a deep breath and stepped out onto the executive floor. Claire's office was at the corner, a glass-walled suite with a panoramic view of the New York City skyline. He stood before the door for a moment before raising his hand and knocking. Come in, a cool voice called from within. Leo entered. He'd seen photos of her in Arthur's office and on his phone, but seeing her in person was different. He felt a strange sense of déjà vu. She was sitting behind a large mahogany desk, engrossed in a file. Her long dark hair was pulled back loosely, and she wore a simple white blouse, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, revealing slender wrists. There was a detached air about her, an aloofness that seemed to insulate her from the world. Ms. Sterling, my name is Leo Vance. Sophia Caldwell sent me. I'm to be your new bodyguard and personal assistant, Leo said, his voice steady. Claire looked up, her piercing blue eyes studying him for a few seconds before returning to her file. I know who you are. You're my father's bodyguard. He mentioned you on the phone. Her tone was flat, as if stating a boring fact. Leo nodded slightly. Yes, Mr. Sterling was very good to me. Her fingers paused on the page. She closed the folder and looked directly at him. My father is gone. I don't need a bodyguard. You can go. Leo didn't move. Ms. Sterling, Ms. Caldwell believes your security is a top priority right now. I won't interfere with your work. My only job is to ensure your safety. You can pretend I'm not even here. A small frown creased her brow. She stood and walked to the window, turning her back to him. Sophia? How thoughtful of her. I heard you were her personal shadow now. I don't need her concern, and I certainly don't need anyone she picked out for me. You can leave. Leo knew her animosity towards Sophia was deep-seated, but he couldn't leave. He had to stay, for reasons he was still trying to untangle. Miss Sterling, please believe me. I'm only here to protect you. She spun around, her eyes flashing with anger. Protect me? Or spy on me? Leo met her gaze without flinching. If you believe that, you're free to fire me at any time. But until you do, I'm going to do my job. Claire was silent for a moment, then let out a short, cold laugh. Fine. If you're so determined to stay, then stay. She pointed toward the hallway. The elevator bank could use a doorman. Stand there, and don't move unless I tell you to. Understood, Leo said with a slight nod, a small sense of relief washing over him. And so, Leo stood by the elevators like a statue, observing the young woman who had just returned from school abroad to take over an empire. He'd only seen her once before, from a distance, at her father's funeral. The foot traffic on the executive floor dwindled as the day wore on. It was well past dark when Claire finally emerged from her office. She stopped short when she saw him still standing there, his posture as rigid as it had been that morning. A flicker of surprise crossed her face. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "You haven't left for the day, ma'am. I can't leave my post." Claire studied him for a second, a silent, unreadable expression on her face. Finally, she sighed. "Let's go. Take me home." In the car, she leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes, not speaking a word the entire ride. Leo glanced at her in the rearview mirror, a pang of sympathy cutting through his calculated mission. He knew that since her father's death, she'd been carrying an unimaginable weight on her shoulders, all alone. As the city lights streaked past, Leo felt the first real cracks appear in his resolve. Hashtag Chapter 6. Winning her trust in the following days, Leo remained a silent, diligent presence by Claire's side. He noted her routine: work, home, and nothing in between. She had her father's focus and sharp intellect, but behind her cool exterior, he saw a vulnerability, a profound weariness she tried to hide from the world. One morning, Leo took a risk. He arrived at her luxury apartment building early and buzzed her unit. Claire answered the door in a loose-fitting white pajama set, her hair tied in a messy ponytail, her face still etched with sleep. She frowned when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" Leo offered a small smile. "I'm your assistant too, remember?" He moved past her into the apartment, carrying a grocery bag. He went straight to the kitchen and started unpacking ingredients. She followed him, her arms crossed. "What are you doing?" "Making you breakfast. I figured your fridge might be empty, so I brought a few things." Claire didn't argue. She watched his efficient movements for a moment before turning and heading back to her room to get ready. When she emerged, a plate of fluffy, scrambled eggs, avocado toast, and a bowl of fresh berries was waiting for her on the dining table. She took a tentative bite, and a look of genuine surprise crossed her face. As she ate, she watched Leo washing the dishes, a flicker of interest in her eyes. This became their new routine. Every morning, Leo would be there, filling her sterile apartment with a warm, comforting smell of coffee and freshly cooked food. Slowly, Claire began to thaw, the wall of ice around her heart showing the first signs of melting. At the office, Leo anticipated her needs before she even voiced them. When she was swamped, he'd quietly organize her files and place a hot cup of tea on her desk. During long, grueling board meetings, he'd slip her a glass of water with honey to soothe her throat. When she worked late, he'd have snacks and fruit waiting for her, along with a cup of chamomile tea to help her unwind. He even started dragging her to a spa for a massage after particularly stressful days. She'd complain about the wasted time, but Leo would often see her drift off to sleep on the massage table, her tense shoulders finally relaxing. He paid attention to her personal life, too. He knew she loved art, so he found out about new gallery openings and exhibitions and arranged for tickets. Once, she casually mentioned an obscure painter she admired. Leo spent days scouring the city's art galleries until he found a small, original piece by the artist and had it delivered to her apartment. Claire pretended to be unimpressed, but the bright, surprised joy in her eyes was unmistakable. She started looking at him with a new softness. The real turning point, however, came at a corporate gala. Claire, stunning in a midnight blue evening gown, moved through the crowd with practiced grace. Her beauty did not go unnoticed. A smarmy trust fund kid named Kyle Jennings, the son of a business rival, made a beeline for her. Jennings had a reputation for being an arrogant bully, and tonight was no exception. He cornered Claire, a glass of champagne in his hand, his words slurring slightly. "Claire, you look absolutely radiant tonight. How about a drink with me? Maybe our companies could find a way to collaborate more closely," he said, reaching out to touch her arm. Claire flinched and took a step back. "Mr. Jennings, please have some respect. I have no interest in collaborating with you." But Jennings was persistent. "Don't be like that. I heard things at Sterling Holdings have been a mess since your father passed. The board is in chaos. You've got no real power." "My family's business is none of your concern," Claire said, her voice dripping with ice. "Come on, don't be so serious. We're all here to have a good time. Just have one drink with me," he insisted, moving closer again. Just as Claire's patience was about to snap, Leo materialized at her side. "Here, Mr. Jennings, have a drink on me," he said, downing the contents of his own glass in one go. Jennings scowled. "And who the hell are you?" "No one important. Just Miss Sterling's security," Leo said, his voice dangerously low. Jennings grabbed Leo by the tie. "A bodyguard? You think you can tell me what to do?" In a single, fluid motion, Leo seized Jennings's hand, applying just enough pressure to make him wince. The man's drunken arrogance evaporated. "Mr. Jennings," Leo said, his eyes cold as steel, "I suggest you stay away from Miss Sterling." With a final twist, he forced Jennings to his knees. "Apologize," Leo commanded. The commotion had drawn a small crowd. Humiliated, Jennings mumbled, "I'm sorry, Miss Sterling," before scrambling to his feet and scurrying away. Claire stood behind Leo, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. Leo turned to her, his expression softening. "It's my job." Then he stepped back, melting into the shadows once more. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of safety she hadn't experienced since her father was alive. On the ride home, Claire was silent. Leo glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Are you okay, Miss Sterling?" She looked up, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "If you hadn't been there tonight, I don't know what I would have done. It's what I'm here for. I'm just glad you're all right," Leo said with a small smile. "Is this how you were with my father?" she asked suddenly. "Did you always protect him like this?" Leo nodded. "I did, but in the end, I couldn't save him. I'm sorry." Claire was quiet for a long moment. "From now on," she said, her voice firm, "you stay with me." Leo's heart skipped a beat. "Thank you, Miss Sterling." Chapter 7. A thaw after the gala incident. The dynamic between Claire and Leo shifted. The professional distance began to dissolve, replaced by a comfortable familiarity. She started talking to him, really talking, and her reliance on him grew with each passing day. One evening, Claire was slumped on the sofa in her office, looking utterly drained. Leo knocked softly and entered. "Long day, Miss Sterling?" he asked gently. She looked up and managed a weak smile. "You have no idea, Leo." He walked over and handed her a glass of warm milk. "Here, this might help you relax." She took it with a grateful sigh. "Thank you, Miss Sterling," Leo said, a rare smile playing on his lips. "Let me take you somewhere." She looked at him, surprised. "Where?" He just grinned. "You'll see." He drove her downtown to a bustling, vibrant street fair, the kind that pops up on summer weekends. The air was thick with the smell of grilled food, popcorn, and sugar, and the street was lined with colorful food trucks and stalls. This place. Claire looked around, her eyes wide with wonder. Leo smiled. "I know you've always wanted to come to one of these, but never had the chance." A flicker of genuine emotion crossed her face. "Thank you, Leo," she said softly. They strolled down the street, and for the first time, Leo saw a different side of her. She was like a kid in a candy store, trying everything from gourmet sliders to spicy tacos. Leo followed a step behind, a warm, protective feeling spreading through his chest as he watched her laugh. "Leo, you have to try this," she said, holding out a skewer of grilled shrimp, her eyes sparkling with excitement. He took it and bit into it. "It's delicious," he said with a smile. She beamed. "I knew you'd like it." As they walked, Claire suddenly stopped, her gaze fixed on a stall selling caramel apples. A nostalgic, faraway look came into her eyes. "My dad used to buy me one of those every time we went to the state fair," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "It was my favorite." Leo looked at her, his heart aching for her. "Then let me buy you one tonight," he said gently. She nodded, a glimmer of tears in her eyes. He bought the biggest, most perfect caramel apple he could find and handed it to her. She took a bite, and a sad, sweet smile touched her lips. "It tastes just like I remember," she said. Leo stood beside her, watching her, knowing that in that moment, she was not the powerful CEO of Sterling Holdings, but just a girl missing her dad. As the night wore on, the lights of the fair began to dim. They walked in comfortable silence, their shoulders occasionally brushing. "Leo," she said suddenly, her voice low, "thank you for bringing me here tonight." She stopped and turned to face him, her eyes searching his. You're very special to me, Leo." His heart hammered in his chest. He couldn't meet her gaze. "Ms. Sterling," he began, his voice hoarse. She shook her head gently. "Call me Claire," she whispered. Leo froze for a second, then nodded slowly. "Claire." "Thank you, Leo," she said again, her voice full of an emotion he couldn't quite name. "For always being here for me." That night, back in her apartment, Claire tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Her mind was filled with images of Leo. Leo defending her, Leo cooking for her, Leo standing beside her with a caramel apple. She realized with a startling jolt that her feelings for him ran much deeper than those of an employer for her bodyguard. Meanwhile, back at the Greenwich estate, Leo stood on the balcony of his room, staring at the distant stars, his own heart in turmoil. "Leo," Sophia's voice cut through the silence. He turned to see her gliding onto the balcony, a glass of red wine in her hand. "How are things progressing?" she asked, her voice cold. Leo hesitated. "She trusts me now," he finally answered. A satisfied smile spread across Sophia's face. She moved closer, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Good," she purred. "The rest is up to you." Leo said nothing, just stood there, letting the cool night wind wash over his face, feeling more trapped than ever. Chapter 8, The Truth. Claire's birthday was approaching, and Leo knew this was his chance. It was time to make a choice. He spent days planning. On the evening of her birthday, he didn't go to the office. When Claire arrived home, exhausted from a long day, she pushed open the door to her apartment and gasped. Her normally sterile patio had been transformed. Fairy lights were strung overhead. Colorful balloons danced in the gentle breeze, and the ground was strewn with rose petals. In the center, a small table was set for two, adorned with a bouquet of her favorite white roses and a beautifully wrapped gift. Leo stood off to the side, a gentle smile on his face. "Happy birthday, Claire." She was stunned. "How did you know it was my birthday?" "Your father mentioned it once." "I remembered," he said simply. Tears welled in her eyes. She walked to the table and gently touched the roses. "Thank you, Leo," she whispered. She picked up the gift and unwrapped it. Inside was an out-of-print art book she had been searching for years, one she had never mentioned to anyone. "I made us some dinner," Leo said softly. "You cooked all this?" she asked, looking at the table laden with all her favorite dishes. He just nodded. After dinner, Claire's cheeks were flushed with wine, her eyes soft and full of affection. She looked at Leo, her heart overflowing. She moved closer and took his hand. "Thank you, Leo. This was the best birthday I've ever had." Claire," he interrupted gently, "I have something else for you." "Another present?" she asked, surprised. He handed her a small, simple box. She opened it. Inside was a single, old-fashioned, slightly rusted key. "What's this?" she asked, confused. Leo took a deep breath. "It's from your father." Claire stared at him, shocked. "From my father? But they said he didn't have anything on him when he died." Leo's expression was grim. "He gave it to me right before the crash. He said this key was for you, that it was vital for your future. Then why are you giving it to me now? He told me to give it to you only if I believed you were in real danger." Her eyes were wide with confusion. "Why else did he leave me?" "I didn't know. I searched everything he owned at the estate, but the key didn't fit any lock there. Then you told me about the old family house upstate, how you used to bury your wishes in a box under the big oak tree. I thought it might be there." Claire's mind flashed back to a childhood memory she'd almost forgotten. Leo looked at her, his face a mask of resolve. "Claire, there's something else I have to tell you." He pulled a small digital recorder from his pocket and handed it to her. "This is proof of what Sophia has been doing," he said, his voice low. She took it, her hand trembling. Sophia? What did she do? The will she presented to the board was a fake, Leo said flatly. She sent me to get close to you, to gain your trust, so she could execute her plan to take your shares. That monster, Claire whispered, horrified. Leo looked at her, his eyes filled with guilt. Claire, I'm so sorry. I've been lying to you. Tears streamed down her face. Leo, why are you telling me all this now? He met her gaze, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. I was an orphan. Your father took a chance on me. He gave me a life. I could never betray him. He clenched his fists. The accident that killed him. It wasn't an accident. It happened too fast. Even I didn't see it coming. Claire listened, her emotions a tangled mess of betrayal, fear, and a strange, overwhelming sense of gratitude. Leo, thank you for telling me the truth. But what do I do now? Sophia is already moving, he said, his voice urgent. She's buying up loose shares, making deals with board members. We have to act fast. Claire straightened her shoulders, a new, steely resolve in her eyes. Okay, she said, her voice firm. We'll do it together. Late into the night, they retrieved the old box from under the oak tree. Inside was a diary, a sealed manila envelope, and a handful of faded childhood trinkets. The diary detailed Arthur's plans for the company's future. Tucked into the last page was a photo of a young Claire. On the back, her father had written, "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. The company is in turmoil, and Sophia's heart is not pure. You are too good for this world, and no match for her schemes. If she moves against you, use the contents of this envelope. You can trust Leo. He is completely loyal." By the time Claire finished reading, she was sobbing. She opened the envelope. Inside was Arthur Sterling's true last will and testament, leaving his entire controlling interest in Sterling Holdings to his beloved daughter, Claire. Hashtag Chapter 9, The Boardroom Coup. The atmosphere in the boardroom was thick with tension. Sophia Caldwell swept in, impeccably dressed in a power suit and heels, an arrogant, triumphant smile on her face. She scanned the faces of the shareholders, confident that in a few short minutes, Sterling Holdings would be completely hers. Claire sat at the opposite end of the long table, her expression calm, but the white-knuckled grip she had on her pen betrayed her inner turmoil. Leo stood silently behind her, a solid, unwavering presence. The meeting began, and Sophia immediately went on the offensive. I've called this meeting to discuss the future of the company. As acting CEO, I believe we need to make some drastic changes, or our market position will be in jeopardy. Claire let out a cold, humorless laugh and slowly rose to her feet. Do you really think this is your company to change, Sophia? You think today is going to go the way you planned? Sophia's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. Oh, Claire, are you trying to pick a fight with me? Your fathers will left me in charge. I was going to be generous, let you stay on and collect your dividends. But if you want to make a scene, I'll be happy to have you removed from the company entirely. She shot a meaningful look at Leo, but he remained impassive. Claire gestured to Leo, who stepped forward and placed the digital recorder on the table. Claire pressed play. Sophia's own voice, clear and conspiratorial, filled the silent room. The lawyer has it all arranged. As soon as the new will is finalized, the company is ours. The color drained from Sophia's face. She stared at Leo, her eyes blazing with disbelief and fury. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. A shocked murmur rippled through the boardroom as the shareholders exchanged uneasy glances. Claire looked at her stepmother, her voice dripping with contempt. You schemed and you plotted, and you thought you'd gotten away with it. This recording is proof of your fraud. You're not just losing your position, Sophia. You're going to prison. Sophia, cornered, suddenly regained her composure and laughed. So what? Even without that will, I'm legally entitled to 20% of Arthur's estate as his wife. Our holdings are equal. What can you do to me? Are you so sure my father didn't leave a will of his own? Claire retorted. At her signal, Leo produced a sealed envelope from his briefcase and placed it in front of Sophia. Sophia snatched it, her hands trembling as she read. Impossible, she muttered. I searched everything. He didn't have another will. This is a forgery. You forged this, she shrieked, her voice cracking. The authenticity of a will isn't for you to decide, Claire said calmly. My father gave you a chance, Sophia. He could have written you out completely, but he didn't, because, God help me, you were my stepmother. What are you talking about? Sophia whispered. Leo stepped forward. Sophia looked at him, her expression a mixture of rage and betrayal. You were lying to me the whole time. No, Sophia, Leo said, his voice steady. I wasn't. If you had left Claire alone, this would have never seen the light of day. That was my final promise to Arthur. We could have coexisted, Claire added, her voice heavy with regret. But you chose greed. Sophia's legs gave out, and she sank in her chair, defeated. Her grand plan had crumbled to dust. In a last, desperate attempt, she looked around at the other board members. You all promised you'd support me. Say something. One of the senior members cleared his throat. Ms. Sterling, please don't listen to her. She's clearly lost her mind. We are, and always have been, fully behind you. Claire ignored them, signaling for security to escort a sobbing, hysterical Sophia from the room. As her stepmother was led away, Claire took a deep breath and turned to face the board. Ladies and gentlemen, from this day forward, I will be leading this company. I will not let my father's legacy be destroyed. The boardroom erupted in applause. Claire had won. She had taken back her father's company. With Sophia facing fraud charges, Claire, guided by her father's diary and supported by Leo, began the arduous task of cleaning house at Sterling Holdings. She methodically rooted out the disloyal board members and, within a few months, had secured a 51% controlling stake in the company. Under her leadership, the company stabilized and began to thrive. Everything was finally on the right track. But as Claire blossomed into a confident and powerful CEO, Leo found himself retreating into the shadows. He would watch her, a quiet pride swelling in his chest, but he knew his time here was over. He didn't deserve to stand in the light beside her. His past, his connection to the darkness that had almost consumed her, was a stain he couldn't wash away. One quiet evening, he found her on the terrace of her apartment and said the words he'd been dreading. Claire, the company is secure now. My job is done. I think it's time for me to leave. Her smile vanished. She stared at him in disbelief. What are you talking about? Why would you leave? Did I do something wrong? Leo couldn't meet her eyes. No, you've been perfect. It's me. I'm not good enough for you. Being with me will only tarnish your reputation. Her eyes filled with tears. She stepped forward and grabbed his arm. Leo, I don't care what anyone thinks. I only care about what we went through together. The way you cared for me. That was real. I felt it. A sharp pain lanced through Leo's heart. He wanted nothing more than to stay, to finally be with the woman he had fallen deeply in love with. But he couldn't. The full truth about her father's death was still a mystery, a hidden threat, and he couldn't risk putting her in danger again. He gently pulled his arm from her grasp. Claire, you deserve better. Forget about me. He turned and walked away, each step feeling like a betrayal. He left her standing alone on the terrace, tears streaming down her face. Leo, come back, she cried out, her voice breaking. Whatever it is, we can face it together. You're the only family I have left. What am I supposed to do without you? In the weeks that followed, Claire moved through life like a ghost, her spark extinguished. Everyone at the company noticed the change, but no one knew the cause. After a week of grieving, she buried her heartbreak and threw herself back into her work, becoming the formidable CEO her father had always known she could be. Leo, true to his nature, never truly left. He watched over her from a distance, a silent guardian angel, ensuring no harm came to her or her company. Only when he was certain she was safe and truly standing on her own 2 feet did he finally disappear. But fate has a funny way of intervening. A year later, on a business trip to Chicago, their paths crossed again. Leo, working under an alias, never imagined she would see through his disguise. But she did. The deal was done. Claire walked out of the hotel into a sudden, torrential downpour. As she waited for her car, her eyes fell on a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a baseball cap, hurrying past her. Something about his posture, his walk, was painfully familiar. Without thinking, she ran out into the rain and threw her arms around him from behind. Leo, she sobbed, burying her face in his back. I know it's you. The man tensed. You have the wrong person, miss. Please let go. Are you still going to run away from me? She cried. I know you've been watching over me, protecting me and the company. I'm not a fool. Whatever the reason was, whatever you were afraid of, we can face it together. I'm not that helpless girl anymore. I'm not letting you go again. Leo stopped struggling. He slowly turned, took off his cap, and placed it on her head to shield her from the rain. The raw emotion on his face was a mirror of her own. He couldn't fight it anymore. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. You idiot, he whispered. It's over. The people behind your father's accident. They're gone. Claire looked up at him, her face streaked with rain and tears. But you still weren't going to come back. If I hadn't caught you today, you would have stayed hidden forever. Leo looked down at her beautiful, determined face. Now that I'm back, he said, his voice thick with emotion, I'm never leaving again. It's our turn now. Our time to fight back. He lowered his head and kissed her, a desperate, passionate kiss right there in the middle of the street in the pouring rain. Passers-by glanced at the crazy couple, shaking their heads before hurrying on their way. This time, Leo didn't run. He had found his home. A few months later, they were married. Claire, radiant in a white gown, walked down the aisle on the arm of a man who had been her shadow, her protector, and was now her future. In front of all their friends and family, they promised to face whatever came their way, together for the rest of their lives.